Okay, so I think we'll start now. Um, there are still some people who are yet to join, so they can keep on joining, but I think we'll start now. So, hello everyone, and welcome to this short course on integrated water resource management. We're also calling it integrated basin management because we try to present a basin level approach. I'm Misha Tandon. I am the host of the LAT of this short course, representing Sustainability and Adaptation Planning Foundation and CREST. I'm an environmental planner, watershed management consultant in the urban water and climate change sector. So I'll quickly take you through the session for today. We'll have a quick introduction to the course, after which we'll have a session on Introduction to Integrated Water Resources Management. There would be a theory session as well as a workshop session where we'll make you into groups and we'll give you an exercise to work on. After that, around 4 p.m., there will be a session on multi-stakeholder platforms. This will also be an interactive session by Ms. Annalie Leninga. She will be talking to you about the theory of multi-stakeholder platforms first, and then there would be an interactive exercise, which you'll be working on in groups. Then there is a presentation on integrated basin development and livelihood programs, which is a basin level program in Meghalaya state of India, which is towards the northeast of India. Mr. Palash Srivastav, who has been associated with this program, has sent us a recorded message for this. And lastly, there would be a presentation on the Ganga Basin. Mr. Manu Bhatnagar here is with us. He is a leading expert on water resource management. He is also a part of the Ganga panel. So he'll also be sharing his perspectives on the Ganga Basin. Now I would request the participants, the mentors to please introduce themselves. Anna, could you start, please?
And thank you, Nisha. Thanks for this opportunity to be part of this course and for organizing it. My background is about 20 years of work experience in the water sector, although I am not a water engineer. I have a legal background and a public policy and public management background. I started my career in the Netherlands and then worked in the European Union on projects cross-border river basin management. And after that, I came to India. That has been more than 10 years ago. Now I live permanently in India and I'm also married here. So I have my family, at least in law, here in India. So I worked in India in several organizations, starting with a private sector company, and then with the 2030 Water Resources Group. I will tell you more about that in my session. And now I'm a consultant, independent consultant, and working with the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, and also with the Netherlands Public-Private Government Agency. I think that's enough for now. Thank you,
Anna. Thanks for your introduction. I think there's so much more to you that they'll come to know during your session. Thanks for the introduction.
Welcome.
Now I would request Mr. Manu Bhatnagar to please introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you, Misha. Good afternoon, everyone. Manu Bhatnagar is my name. I'm an architect, urban and environmental planner, and I have worked in the water sector for the past 2.5 decades. So I have a wide variety of experience in urban as well as larger landscapes in the water sector. So some very diverse experiences in lake management, in river basin management, and I too have worked with several organizations, taught at SPA. Currently I'm with INTAC, Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, where I had the Natural Heritage Division, and where prime focus area is water. So in due course, as I speak, I'll be able to tell you something more.
Thank you, sir, for this introduction, and again, a very short introduction for a very big expert. Now I'll quickly introduce Mr. Palash Srivastav. He is expert in infrastructure transaction advisory. He's the PPP expert in this sector, infrastructure sector particularly, and management consulting, fundraising, capacity building and training in India. He has done a lot of work on that. He has led teams on a variety of leadership roles like business head, regional manager, and he has worked with a lot of recognized groups like the IDFC Group, CRISIL, Feedback Ventures, and ILFS. He has worked on transactions in core infrastructure sectors, water supply, railways, agriculture, just to name a few. He's an MBA from Podar Institute and a civil engineer from Malviya National Institute of Technology. Now I'll quickly introduce myself also. I am Misha Tandon. I'm an architect planner with specialization in watershed management. I hold a master's degree in watershed management from UK. I have more than 15 years of experience in the field of urban development, climate change, water. I have worked on smart cities also, and water resource management, sanitation, wash aspects. I have also worked across sectors. So integration is an important role that I play, integration across sectors. And also I try to bridge the gap between the global and the local, because I have worked a lot with stakeholders at the grassroots level. Some of my accomplishments include that I have been a Commonwealth Chair Scholar. I have been finalist of the UK Alumni Awards for Social Impact, just to name a few. The others you can read yourself. Now with this, we are going to start the session. Just a few housekeeping information in the beginning, because a lot of you have asked me about the e-certificate. So I request all of you to please stay with us throughout the entire day as long as this course is running, because you have to complete this course in order to get that e-certificate. Now, I will start with my presentation on integrated water resources management. The content for my presentation today will start with the need for an alternative approach. Why do we need integrated water resource management? Then what should IWRM entail? What is it all about? Then we look into the principles of integrated water resource management from a catchment perspective as well as from a urban perspective. And then we look at certain case examples, and you'll be forming groups to work on those case examples. So before I start, just a quick check. I hope I'm audible and my screen is visible, right? Anybody can show me a thumbs up.
I don't think your screen is visible.
Oh, my screen is not visible. Now I think it's visible.
Yes, Misha.
Okay, so basically the typical flow of water in our cities is about, we are extracting water from rivers and water bodies, lakes, ponds. We are constructing dams and extracting groundwater. This is sent to urban areas and rural areas for residential, commercial, industrial, and other uses. And in rural areas, it's also used for farmlands. We generate treated or untreated wastewater, and then this is discharged into the rivers and water bodies. And similarly, we also have runoff from agriculture, which goes and meets our rivers and water bodies, as well as the groundwater from where we are extracting. So I would like you to either unmute yourself and talk, or write in the chat window, what do you think is the problem with this approach? Why do you think, I mean, is this approach correct? Do we really need to change anything here? You can either unmute yourself and talk, or you can type out in the chat window. Or is it too early to start interacting? Nobody? Okay. Silent group, yeah. Oh, somebody's writing. A lot needs to be changed. It is becoming a cycle, right? You are not sure. Okay. The approach is too linear. Yes, very right, Abhimanyu. The approach is more linear. We need a circular pattern. That's correct. There are a lot of disadvantages of this approach that we'll see here. It leads to the catchment approach being ignored. It leads to ignorance of the vulnerable communities, pollution, floods. It's in a way non-democratic also, non-sustainable as well, and many other things that you can find on this word cloud. But what is the solution? How can we improve? Let's first understand how this approach is going to help us or not help us in view of climate change. Now, these are climate change figures for India, where the annual precipitation has been predicted and the annual temperatures have been, changes in surface temperatures have been predicted for the future. So you have 2040 to 2069 in the first column, and in the first chart, and 2070 to 2099 in the second one. So this here is what shows you the first 3 decades, and then till the end of the century. So if we look at this, there is going to be an increase in surface temperatures of around 2 degrees to 3 degrees. What is RC? Yeah, so this is the model that they have used for predicting this. There is a detailed document that you can refer to, but broadly what this says is that if the temperature rises to 4.5 degrees or 8.5 degrees, then what is the impact on rainfall and temperature trends? So you can see the rainfall is likely to increase in the Himalayan region also, and the surface temperature is also likely to increase. Some places it can even rise up to 4 degrees. That's why it becomes very, very important to look at how we are going to manage our water in that situation. This is a risk mapping of the world. You can see India is pretty vulnerable along with a lot of parts of the subcontinent. Africa is relatively less vulnerable right now, but still the likelihood of vulnerability is very much there. Now we'll start with the principles. Where did the concept of IWRM come from? It came from the Dublin Principles. So there are 4 principles mainly on which this concept is based. And this is based on the information from GWP. So the first principle is that fresh water is finite and vulnerable. It's available in a limited quantity and it's very, very essential for life. Now, water management and development, they need to be participatory, including users properly. Women have to play a central role. We have seen a lot of case studies where women-led projects and interventions at the local level have been very, very successful. And women are the ones who face the maximum impact of water scarcity or floods or any other water resource issue like groundwater pollution or water pollution in general. So women have a role to play. and water has an economic value. All competing uses are have to have some economic value. They should be considered as economic goods. So based on these principles, IWRM concept has been defined, and this is the definition of the process. IWRM is a process. It's not a one-time thing that you do. It's a continuous and iterative process and a cycle even, which promotes the coordinated development and management of water, land, and related resources in order to maximize social and economic welfare. So, sorry about that. Without compromising the sustainability of vital ecosystems and the environment. Now we look at some of the principles of IWRM. What is it that we are doing and how can IWRM help us change it? So like some of you already pointed out, the water flow presently is very, very linear. So it needs to be more circular. That's what IWRM approach promotes, that you need to focus on the water loop, the entire water loop, water in all its forms, wastewater, storm water, nutrient recovery, discharge, your rainwater harvesting. It all forms a part of the same loop. Don't consider wastewater as a waste. It is a resource to be tapped into. Then an example, if you look at it, a lot of cities in India have separate agencies managing water supply, drainage, wastewater. Now, if you have a scenario like several countries abroad also have, they have a single agency managing the entire water cycle. So do you think there is a possibility that if a single agency is looking at the entire water loop, they can look into rainwater harvesting better, they can look into stormwater drainage better, they can look into reuse of wastewater in a better way, and they can look into treatment of wastewater in a better way. So these aspects, I think, need a comprehensive approach. Now, another principle is that managing water resource at the lowest possible level. Instead of the kind of centralized decision making that we have, there is a need for a community approach towards decision making. Like in India, water is a state subject. There's still some devolution of power. Some stakeholders are involved in decision making, but it's still mostly a top-down approach until recently, wherein it's been a mix of top-down and bottom-up. But in a IWRM based approach, community has to lead the decision making. It has to be involved in the entire process of decision making. So for example, India has the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts, which promoted the devolution of powers to the urban and rural local bodies. So since these acts, these Constitutional Amendment Acts came into being, power has been decentralized to municipalities and gram panchayats in India, so that they have more power to cater to infrastructure and other services at the local level. Now, participatory approach, as I said, centralized, usually we have a centralized system and a centralized treatment. Is that really necessary? Because in some cases, or rather in many cases, it might be more costly and it will probably have lower resilience to impacts of climate change, because there is dependence on only one or two sources of water. Whereas if you look at a community managed decentralized system, it might be less costly. It will certainly have higher resilience because you'll have a lot of decentralized units across your city. And the dependence on sources will be scattered across your geography. So for example, if you look at the Indian context, there is separate separate body for water supply, separate body for water resources, but drainage is completely ignored. Sewerage management is usually under municipalities, but smaller municipalities don't look at it when they go beyond a certain size. They start looking at the need for wastewater management. So this kind of an approach in the long term might not be that useful. Then an IWRM approach promotes the basin as a unit for planning. Administrative boundaries are generally used, like all of us know, but water does not follow administrative boundaries. It follows natural gradient, and that is why catchment, which is the basin, that becomes a very, very important unit for managing water resources. An example, rather I would say, the most perfect example in the present day context is the water framework directive, which is being followed across UK and Europe, where river basin forms planning unit for water resource management. Now, another principle states that you need to optimize supply and manage demand. The present system has a focus only on demand. I will discuss a case study of Singapore with you also, wherein they have tried to balance their demand and their supply and reuse as much as possible so that the pressure on the water resources is limited. Because you cannot, in an unending way go on abstracting from the resources. Now, another principle states that equitable supply through participatory and transparent governance and management. In our cities, what happens is that slum areas, because they do not have land rights and tenure rights, they are generally excluded from all the water supply, sewerage, network laying, and that creates a problem in the longer run. It ultimately impacts the city itself in a very, very adverse way. So that is where an IWRM approach comes in, which says that equitable access to all is very, very important. For example, organizations like Development Alternatives have worked with slums in India to provide, entrepreneurs, bring in entrepreneurs to provide facilities within those slums that can cater to the local requirements of water supply in that area. Although I wouldn't say that this is completely closing the loop, but it's at least a step in the right direction, because the people in the slum areas are really suffering because of lack of access to water supply. Another aspect is establishing improved and integrated policy, regulatory, and institutional frameworks. Now, we all know that all our countries have these institutional silos. The water supply department will not talk to the wastewater department. The wastewater department will not talk to the waste management department. And all these departments will not talk to the land use department. But that is the wrong approach. We need to have an intersectoral integration for planning of water resources by taking all the stakeholders into account. Another principle states that integrating management means that we receive multiple benefits from a single intervention. Usually what happens is that we plan projects just for solving one problem, like, okay, there is a drain that is entering my river, I will make an STP here. That is my project. But if you look at multi-dimensional approach, if you could have a nature-based STP, which is not even stressing your energy grid, then you can have additional components like reuse of the treated wastewater to this. So one project will still be there, but it will cater to multiple aspects of planning. Now, climate change aspects are usually getting ignored when we are planning in the conventional way. But an IWRM approach says that climate change in both its aspects, adaptation also and mitigation also, should be integrated throughout the planning cycle. It's an integral part, and risks and hazards, like for example, if you're planning for your city drainage, you need to take into account that, okay, in future, maybe I'll get 20% more rain. So there will be 20% more capacity needed for my drainage network. So does it have to be necessarily a gray network? Can it be a green network which can benefit from this additional rainfall? So, for example, I'll give you a case from Tamil Nadu, wherein there were increasing instances of drought because of climate change. And there were a lot of traditional ponds and rainwater harvesting structures which were lying defunct. So, under a project by Dhan Foundation and BODCAP, which are GWP partners, they they enhance the capacity of these existing tanks. So they restored them. Farm ponds were also constructed. So this provided the population with a lot of climate resilience. So it builds their capacity to face extreme conditions which are likely under climate change. And another thing I would like to say here is that probably this approach should also advocate green infrastructure, because gray infrastructure alone might not be the solution. What I mean by gray infrastructure and green infrastructure is, gray infrastructure is the conventional cement-based, concrete-based infrastructure that we use, centralized one. But green infrastructure is more nature-based. Like you can have nature-based systems for wastewater treatment. If you need to secure your water supply, you need not to build more dams. You can probably go for catchment management to ensure that you get enough supply in the future. So these kind of approach can also be promoted. Now I'll come to the urban aspect of integrated water resource management. It's called integrated urban water management. I would just add that word resource also to this. So IWRM is the water resource management at the catchment level, and the urban water management is a localized version of this. I will not go through the entire definition again, but basically this concept also calls for sustainable economic, social, and environmental goals to be achieved through better management of water. Now I'll go through some select principles of the urban water management, which will give you an idea how this circle can be managed better in the local context of our cities. So, like we said, the cycle is mostly linear. It's generally, you know, coming from rural areas upstream, where from we extract water, we use the water, and then we discharge the wastewater, treated or untreated. Mostly it's not adequately treated. And this is discharged downstream into rural areas. So it's a linear loop. But we need to close this loop. We need to bring in water supply, water resource management, wastewater management, stormwater management, everything into one cycle, and close that loop and recover as much as we can. Now, another principle says that you consider for all requirements of water, both anthropogenic and ecological. So this e-flows concept has now been looked at by the ministry, and a minimum flow has been decided that, you know, this much of flow should be maintained in our rivers, because rivers are not only important for us, they're also important for the ecosystem that they are a part of. There are trees, there is flora, fauna, birds, microbes, everything is dependent on water. So those uses also are equally important. Then this is similarly, we need to look at all the stakeholders in the planning process and match the water quality with water use. This is a very important principle. You need to match the quality of water with water use. All of us get drinking water quality in our taps. We use that water in toilets. Is that justified? We use that water for washing our clothes. Is that justified? Can we not look at an approach wherein we are getting alternative source of water also, which can be used for secondary purposes like washing cars, washing floors, etc.? If we look at the water consumption pattern, 20% of water is used in toilet, 7.2 only is used for drinking, and a lot of other uses can be done using a lower grade water or recycled water even. So if you could just quickly type in the chat which city do you think will be more resilient in view of climate change? Is it going to be a city which takes water from a single dam, or is it going to be a city that receives water from 5 or 6 different sources? You can type your response in the chat. B, yes, correct. So if you have multiple sources of water, what happens is that you have more resilience. Like we see in the pandemic today, you're not able to access a lot of resources. If, say, for example, your main water supply is under stress, or there is some inevitable problem which makes it defunct, what other option do you have? How will you sustain in case this fails? So that has to be built in into the system. Now, another principle is that strive for sustainability. Demands have to be balanced. Social, economic, and environmental needs have to be balanced. Like this portfolio shows, there is a single or double source based city, and there is a city which has multiple sources, and one important source is reuse also. So this city is going to be more resilient for the future. Now, another principle says that you strive for sustainability. And like I said, Singapore example, right now they're using 45% fresh water and 55% from new water. In the future, they're going to increase this demand being met from new water to 70%. I hope all of you know that in Singapore, new water is the brand name given to recycled water. So they're using this water and they're planning to meet a lot of their requirement from this water in the future. Gujarat, in our country, in India, has a policy to encourage reuse of wastewater for industrial reuse. And Maharashtra also has a policy to support use of wastewater for power plants. So I know of some cities where there has been an agreement between a water supply provider or a municipality and industry that needs water. There has been a pact that municipality will supply all its treated water to this industry. So this is reuse of water, and the city also benefits. They have a revenue from it. Now, if we look at the water loop in the urban areas, it's like this, rain, snow, surface water come in, discharges from upstream come in, there's evapotranspiration losses, but we use this water and ultimately we end up discharging treated or untreated wastewater into the downstream sources. But the correct approach demands that we integrate this cycle. We integrate sanitation, we integrate waste aspects, we integrate wash aspects. Wash means water, sanitation, and hygiene. Water resources, water supply, wastewater, and stormwater, they need to form part of a single cycle. There is also an important aspect of ecology that we need to look at. That is why multi-layer planning is very, very important when you're looking for management of water resources. So these can be topography, soil, geology, the elevation, terrain, and a lot of other like urban uses, rural uses. And then you need to plan for the water resource management. And IWRM has a planning process. It's not a fixed process. Like I said, it's an iterative process. Like you keep on going on in this cycle again and again and keep on refining it to suit your local requirements. So some of the steps that you can take are that first you identify the issue. Then for that issue, you prioritize, okay, which is the main issue that is plaguing me. And then to address that issue, what is the vision that I have to form for my city? Vision means like where do you want to see your city in 15 years or 20 years from the water supply perspective, say for example. So you can build scenarios. What is the best case scenario? What is the worst case scenario? And then you make vision for both of these scenarios. How will you plan if the worst case scenario comes true? How will you plan if your best case scenario comes true? And then you set goals or objectives to meet this vision. How will you reach there? Strategize it and prioritize. You have to prioritize. Like for reaching a vision, there might be 20 steps that might come up, but you can't implement all of them simultaneously. You need to prioritize. What is my priority? Especially what is the low hanging fruit? What is it? Because funding is a major constraint. Stakeholder mobilization also takes time. So what is the low hanging fruit that I can start the work with, which will build the platform for community mobilization for other aspects? And then you implement and get into monitoring and evaluation framework also. You need to ensure that whatever you build or whatever you implement to achieve a water resource IWRM based approach is monitored, because that will help you quantify your advantages, your benefits from that project, and it will also help you identify where you have gone wrong so that in the next planning cycle you can address these issues. So now this is all for the theory aspect from my side. Now we'll get into a workshop mode. So may I request Isha or Vedant to please make the groups. Okay, I will. Okay, just a minute before we go into that, I will quickly introduce the case studies to you. These are the case studies that you'll work on, and then we'll break into groups so you can start working on and detailing out those case studies. So we will form you into two groups, and each group will be given a city to work on. So the first city that I'm going to talk about is Himachal Pradesh. It's a city in the Himalayan region of India. Now I want you to listen very carefully, because this is going to lead to the group work in a few minutes. So Himachal has a population of around 1.7 lakh, which is 0.17 million. It has a planning area of around 100 square kilometer. The total supply is 30 MLD. An important point to note is that Shimla is located on the ridge. Ridge means it's located on the top of the mountain, and the water sources are at the valley level. So it's pumping most of the water upstream, against gradient, so that the water reaches Shimla city. So there are a lot of rivers and nalas and khads that they tap into. And because it's a mountain terrain, tube wells are rather limited, but still some tube wells are also used. The combined source capacity is approximately 46 million liters per day, and wastewater generation is approximately 35 MLD. Now, the issues that the city faces are that it's a tourist destination. Approximately 75,000 tourists per annum come in, Indian and international. In the last few years, we've had situation where hoteliers and residents have been crying out that please don't come to our city. Please don't come during summers, because the plains get heated up in India and all the North Indians start going to the mountain areas. It has led to such a bad situation that people could, don't end up getting rooms and they have to sleep on the roads. It's that bad during summers. So there have been a lot of resistance from the locals that, don't come to us in that, in those numbers. Don't come to us during peak summers. So water scarcity during summers is another problem that the city faces because a lot of these water resources dry out. And there was a study I'll talk to you about, which found that springs are very, very important for sustaining the base flow in the rivers and streams. And a lot of these springs are dying out because there is a lot of construction in the catchment area. So there is also a lack of adequate wastewater treatment facilities. There was a hepatitis outbreak in the city around a few years ago, and the water availability at sources is declining. There has been also a issue with deforestation. Also, although the city has taken measures to do some plantation also, but there is rapid urbanization. I'll show you some images, and the increasing heat and the impacts of climate change are actually suffocating and choking the city. During winters, the water supply lines, they also end up freezing. Now, I want you to think about the city and think of how will you make a vision for this city for the next 20 years. And when you do that, also think about climate change. Climate change meaning that temperature is going to increase during summers, rainfall is going to increase. And what is also important here is that I don't know how many of you would have heard of this, but there have been glacial lake outbursts in the Himalayan region. They have happened in another state, but there have been huge floods because a lake formed by glacial melt upstream has broken down, and a lot of water suddenly comes, and it even washes away dams. It's, the flow is that powerful. So in view of climate change, how will you prepare this city to deal with the future? So this is a Google image of Shimla city. As I said, it's located on the ridge area. These are some images which show you the urbanization in Shimla, although it's still showing a lesser amount of urbanization. The extent of urbanization is much, much more than this. This is the topography, the four catchment areas of Shimla city. And as I said, there was a study which I had done around 10 years back, which showed that the when it rains, the water percolates. There is a lot of water that would run away, but then the kind of rocks that are there, they lead to gradual flow below the surface. And this water appears at springs through fractures and crevices. And this is very, very important for sustaining the springs. And these springs are very, very important because they add to the summer flow in the rivers. And that is very, very important because you need that lean flow, that base flow in your rivers. So that was one example for which you have to formulate a vision. The other example is of a desert city in Rajasthan. For this city, you have to look into the water loop. What is the existing water loop and how will you change it for the future? So this is a desert region. You actually have sand dunes here, and you won't believe it, in view of climate change, this area, which is an absolute desert, has been prone to flooding. I mean, the neighboring area and some part of this area also has been prone to flooding over the last 3 or 4 years. Can you imagine, during monsoon, the desert area gets flooded? So traditional wisdom of water harvesting is a very big forte of this region. I'll show you some images. Traditionally, because people have been used to living in water scarcity situation, they have built their own mechanisms to tap water, to conserve it, and to secure it over a longer period, which can sustain them through droughts. The population is around 65,000. The area is slightly bigger than the city that we talked about. The total supply is 9.5 MLD. Now, this is sourced from Ganga Basin, which is approximately 1,000 kilometers from this place. So can you imagine water is coming to this place from 1,000 plus kilometer from the Ganga Basin. Now, around there's a huge water loss in the channels also. So the amount that is released from the Ganga Basin and the amount which reaches them, there is a significant difference also. And they also have a wastewater treatment plant which has been constructed. Uh, they also use some bore wells, and the wastewater treatment plant is for 100 MLD and it is functional at 50%. They're also looking at possibilities of reusing this treated wastewater. But since the plant is pretty far from the city, but maybe closer to some industrial area, the discussions are going on. So what are the main issues? This place is a very, very big international tourist destination. So come winters and people flock to this place like anything. You won't get a room if you try to get one around December. And a problem with this is that, you know, the people here mostly try and earn their annual, wages in this 3 or 4 month tourist season, and the rest of the year they are generally unemployed. So unemployed in the sense they don't need to work, they earn that much which is sufficient for them to sustain them through the year. And this area faces huge water scarcity, but in the hotels you have swimming pools and you have bathtubs. Encroachment over water bodies is also a very important problem in this area. This area also has a very important, or rather I would say beautiful thing, that it had some ponds which were built over centuries and they are interlinked ponds. So overflow from one goes to the other and the third one and so on. So now I'll show you some images. This is one of the ponds in that area. You can see the amount of sand that is there. It's a complete desert area. And see, this is one pond. The overflow from this pond goes into this pond. Then the overflow from this goes in here. So there are a series of interconnected ponds, but over time, these interlinkages have been lost. So, you know, we find this principle in a lot of Indian cities where interlinked ponds were constructed, but they were encroached upon. And now these areas end up getting floods and drought situations. So this is a view of one of the ponds in that area. This is a traditional rainwater harvesting structure which was built. What you see in the background, just a minute. What you see in the background here is Amar Sagar. This is actually a huge pond. So what happens is that the pond gets filled. Then there is a series of boulis or underground water retention structures which have been built for animals specifically. So there is also this gradation of uses. Like this, you see, is a a well from where people are taking drinking water. Then they will have a lower quality water stored in boulis, which are for mainly for use for washing clothes or for animals to drink from or things like that. And then you have the large pond, which is for multiple uses like bathing of animals, bathing of people, even for agriculture and stuff. So there is not only a very important focus on conserving water, but also matching the quality of water with the use, which was one of the principles that we talked about. Another view of that pond. So this is the first exercise where you'll work out a vision for Shimla city in view of climate change. And then in the second exercise for Rajasthan, Jaisalmer, you will work out the water loop for the city. What is the present water loop and how will you make the water loop for the future, considering disasters, considering extreme events, uncertainty, climate change impacts? How will you plan for the future? The present loop might be linear. How will you close this loop in view of climate change? So now we will break into rooms. I will stop screen sharing. The data that you might require, definitely diversifying their sources, definitely. So we'll split you into two groups. Shardul and Lakshya will be there in each of the groups, and they'll start working with you. And I will keep on coming in and out of these groups. So think about it and start working. So mountain area, what will be your vision for that city? And the desert area, how will you close the water loop? These are the two exercises for you to work on. So please go ahead. Isha and Vedant, can you please make the groups?
Creating the breakout.
Sure. Oh, just a second, I forgot the Google form also.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So we are trying to get a hold of your backgrounds because none of us are familiar with what backgrounds you guys are coming from. So there's a Google form that I'm pasting in the chat box. While we are going into groups and the groups are being formed, I request you to please click this link and fill information about yourself. It's generally going to ask you about your name, your qualification, your institution, and whether you represent government or NGO or so on. So please click on this link in the chat box. I've put it in the chat box and fill it. We'll give you 5 minutes to fill it. Then I'll show the responses that I have got, and then we'll split into groups. So please go ahead and fill this form, please.
Nisha, should I open?
Just wait for them to fill the form, then I'll show the results of the form and then you can send them to the breakout rooms. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope everybody is able to see the chat box and the link in the chat box. If you have a problem, please let us know. Okay, we are starting to get responses. Great. Some people from Africa, I think, are still to fill the form. So, can you please complete them? I'll share the screen meanwhile. So we have a good geographical spread, so no particular city. We have a lot of people from India, one from Somalia. I believe there are more from Africa. They're still filling their form. One from USA. Uh, Quite a diverse background of participants. A lot of institutes. SPA Delhi has the highest number. Do you wish to receive? Mostly are saying yes. What is your professional background? So early career professionals. We have a lot of early career professionals and followed by students and mid-career professionals. How are you associated with the water sector? You study in this sector, okay? Research or consultancy or awareness raising advocacy, okay? And in terms of sectors, I think this is a very good mix. We have government, we have educational institutes, then we have an equal representation of NGOs and private, very nice. Okay, 14 responses so far. I think we can close at that. Those who have not yet filled, I think some people from Africa are still to fill in. So I will type out this link in the breakout rooms also, so you can continue filling it there. But for now, I think all of us have seen what a good variety of a rich mix of backgrounds that we have here. So I think Isha, you can please make the breakout rooms now.
Opening the room.
Yeah.